Okay, so I knew that the backlash against Battlefront 2 would have some semblance of negative effect on the overall game sales, but I had no idea that it would be this bad. The last time we heard about the game's potentially poor performance was when physical sales figures from the UK saw Battlefront 2 sell 61% worse than Battlefront 1 did during the same launch period. Now, granted, a part of that can likely be attributed to the rise of digital sales, but a 61% drop in physical sales was simply far too substantial to just be a result of that. From where I was sitting, there was no denying that a significant portion of that reduction had to do with a PR nightmare that EA had to deal with. But even then, nothing was really certain. We still didn't have the exact sales figures, so whether Battlefront 2 was a relative success or not for EA was still up in the air. Well, wonder no more, because the Wall Street Journal just dropped some sales figures that provide an even clearer picture. One that I think those protesting against EA's predatory practices will find quite pleasing. Here's a tweet posted by Wall Street Journal reporter Sarah E. Needleman, which reads as follows. US console video game sales rose 9% in November from a year ago to $842 million, led by Activision's new Call of Duty World War II with 4.4 million units sold, according to MPD. But it was a disappointing month for Electronic Arts, whose high-profile Star Wars Battlefront 2, which debuted about 2 weeks later, sold just 882,000 units, the research firm estimates. Still, Wedbush thinks that sales will rebound this month. We believe that the loyalty of the Star Wars fanbase, the game's appeal as a holiday gift, and the release of Star Wars The Last Jedi on December 15th will result in sales of the game bouncing back. Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way is that these MPD figures only accommodate retail or physical sales. We still don't know what digital sales look like for either title, so that's something worth considering. However, with Call of Duty World War II acting as a point of reference for how many retail copies a popular game can drive, we can certainly surmise by now that Battlefront 2 sales aren't doing so hot. Actually, no, that's an understatement. These sales are pretty dismal by EA standards. Just to give you another point of reference, Star Wars Battlefront 1 sold 2.1 million retail units during its launch month, and keep in mind that both Battlefront 1 and 2 released on November 17th of their respective year. And within the same time period, Battlefront 2 only sold 40% of what Battlefront 1 did. Once again, some of that likely has to do with the rise of digital sales, but a big chunk of that was undoubtedly a result of all the controversy surrounding the second entry. The bottom line is that as far as retail units go, Star Wars Battlefront 2 only sold a measly 20% of Call of Duty World War II sales. Another way to put it would be that World War II sold 5 times more than what Battlefront 2 did. And even with a 2-week lead that World War II had, that is still a significant disparity. So yeah, about EA wanting to sell 14 million units of the game in the span of 5 months, that probably ain't happening. Unless by some miracle Star Wars The Last Jedi provides the game the boost it needs, EA is looking at a pipe dream at this point. That's not to say that the movie won't boost the game sales, but the fact still remains that if sales are already this bad, then it's going to come nowhere close to realizing EA's original sales goals. And until they change the game's progression system so that it's not an egregiously grindy and exploitable mess, and so that it doesn't revolve around loot boxes, it seems doubtful that perception of the game will change anytime soon. With how widespread Battlefront 2's loot box fiasco is, many parents are bound to have heard of the news that potential gambling mechanics might be at play and will want to avoid buying this game for their kids like a plague. But where EA will take the biggest financial hit from is undoubtedly the last-minute temporary removal of microtransactions. If they would have kept it on, they could have mitigated some of the financial damage with recurrent revenue from in-game purchases. I can only surmise that if it were up to EA, they would have kept it in despite the backlash, but after Disney saw how much damage Battlefront 2 was doing to their beloved Star Wars brand, they had to step in, give EA a call, and twist their arm to temporarily disable microtransactions until the hurricane passes, which surely made a substantial dent on EA's cash flow. So all around, this whole situation is a complete disaster for EA and a victory for gamers who were sick and tired of their bullshit. And EA had all of it coming. Now, it's worth noting that where Battlefront 2 underwhelmed sales, World War II, which features its own egregious form of loot boxes, flourished in its place, so I can't say that this feels like a complete victory. Battling loot boxes honestly feels a bit like playing whack-a-mole. You strike one down and another one pops right back up to take its place. Granted, World War II's loot boxes, as bad as they are with the way they exploit jealousy by opening in front of other people, still pale in comparison to Battlefront 2's shady scheme. So one could say that we defeated the greater of two evils. Activision did the smart thing and managed to avoid the spotlight by keeping the loot boxes centered around cosmetics, though it's worth noting that there are things like XP multipliers mixed into the rewards pool to nudge players towards purchasing them, and data miners have found that weapon supply drops are making their way, instigating pay-to-win concerns. But regardless of what underhanded tactics these greedy game publishers intend to employ, at this point, there's only so long that they can hide in the shadows. If they're expecting for this whole thing to just blow over, well, they are in for a rude awakening. Currently, perception of microtransactions and loot boxes are at an all-time low, and stigmatized discussion of them are at an all-time high. And with Hawaii State Legislator Chris Lee pushing towards regulating loot boxes so that games implementing them can't be accessed by anyone younger than 21, publishers will eventually be forced to step back before they do irreparable damage. So this can end in one of two ways. Either the ESRB steps in and enforces their own criteria about how games with real gambling should be rated adult only, or the government will eventually kick the door down and take matters into their own hands. I would prefer the former, but either way, it's your move, gaming industry, your move. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative, and if you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon to help this channel stay independent and self-sustained. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.